What if I told you Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't even his real name, that he once had a knife shoved inches from his heart and survived, that the world's most famous speech was never meant to happen? You think you know Dr. King? You've only scratched the surface. Fact 11. His real name wasn't Martin. Most people know the name, but very few know the truth behind it. Martin Luther King Jr., the face of peace, justice, and courage, was not even born with that name. On January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, a child came into this world as Michael King Jr., not Martin, Michael. So, what happened? The story starts with his father, a preacher and a man of deep conviction, who, in 1934, took a trip to Germany. There, he encountered the legacy of Martin Luther, a German monk who stood up against the corruption of the Catholic Church and ignited the Protestant Reformation. This wasn't just a history lesson. For Michael King Sr., it was a moment of awakening. He saw in Martin Luther a rebel, a man who challenged an empire using nothing but faith and truth. And when he returned to America, he made a bold decision. He changed his own name and his young sons to Martin Luther King. But why? Was it an act of admiration or a declaration of destiny? To give a black child in Jim Crow America the name of a man who shattered religious authority was not just symbolic, it was subversive. A name chosen with the weight of purpose, as if preparing him for a war he hadn't yet seen. So the next time you hear Martin Luther King Jr., remember, that name wasn't just inherited, it was forged. Fact 10. He paid for Julia Roberts' birth. What does the birth of a white Hollywood actress have to do with a civil rights icon? It sounds unbelievable. But yes, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. paid the hospital bill for Julia Roberts' birth. How did this happen? Before the world knew her name, Julia was just a baby girl born into an interracial story few people knew. Her parents, Walter and Betty Roberts, were theater teachers in Atlanta, but not just any theater teachers. They ran the only integrated acting school in the city during a time when segregation was law. And they didn't just accept black children, they welcomed them, even when it meant facing threats and losing students. Among those children, the sons and daughters of Martin and Coretta King. A bond was formed, one of respect, one of courage. So when the Roberts couldn't afford the hospital bill for their newborn daughter, the Kings stepped in, quietly, without recognition, and paid it. It's poetic, isn't it? The man who dreamed of racial harmony helped bring into the world someone who would one day thrive in it. But ask yourself this, if Julia Roberts had been black, would anyone have stepped in to pay that hospital bill? Fact 9. He survived an assassination attempt. Most people remember the day Martin Luther King Jr. died, but almost no one talks about the day he was supposed to die and didn't. The year was 1958. He was only 29. The Montgomery bus boycott had made national headlines. His name was rising, and so was the danger around it. Dr. King was in Harlem, signing copies of his first book, Stride Toward Freedom. The crowd was friendly, until it wasn't. A 42-year-old black woman stepped forward. She asked, "Are you Martin Luther King?" He smiled and said yes, without hesitation. She pulled a 7-inch letter opener from her purse and drove it deep into his chest. The blade landed just a fraction of an inch from his aorta. One surgeon would later say, if he had sneezed, he would have drowned in his own blood. The attacker, Izola Curry, suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and was ruled mentally unfit to stand trial. But the question remains, why did someone from his own community try to end his life? Was it mental illness alone? Or was it the weight of a message so bold, so disruptive, that even those he fought for weren't ready to carry it? Martin survived that day, but the scars ran deeper than skin. Fact 8. The I Have a Dream speech was improvised. It's the most quoted speech in modern history, studied in schools, played every January, etched into monuments. But what if I told you the part we remember most was never supposed to be in it? August 28, 1963. Over 250,000 people gather at the Lincoln Memorial for the March on Washington. The final speaker of the day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He begins with a prepared speech, methodical, precise, careful, but then something happens. From behind him, gospel legend Mahalia Jackson shouts, "Tell them about the dream, Martin!" There's a pause. He looks out at the crowd, sets his notes aside, and what followed was pure history. Not rehearsed, not written, straight from the soul. I have a dream. Those words weren't planned. They were born in that moment, from years of pain, hope, and fire. And yet, behind the poetry was a warning about a check America had bounced, about a dream deferred for far too long. So now, ask yourself, if the most powerful speech of the century was improvised, what else did King hold back? And what dreams never made it to the mic? Fact 7. He was arrested over 25 times. We're often taught that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a peaceful man, that he believed in nonviolence, that he worked within the system. But if that were true, in the way they tell it, why was he arrested over 25 times? The truth is, peaceful doesn't mean passive, and nonviolent doesn't mean obedient. Dr. King led protests, sit-ins, marches, and strategic disruption. His goal was to expose injustice by refusing to comply with it. But to the system, that made him dangerous. His crimes were things like disturbing the peace, marching without a permit, loitering, trespassing. Yet every arrest came with a message. If standing up gets me locked up, then this fight is exactly where I belong. One of his most powerful moments, writing the letter from Birmingham jail in 1963. Behind bars, on scraps of paper, he delivered a moral earthquake. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That line wasn't written in comfort. It was written in chains. So the next time someone tells you he worked within the rules, ask them, whose rules? Fact 6. He only met Malcolm X once. They were the two most powerful voices of their time. Two men who carried the hope and the rage of an entire people. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. We love to compare them. Peace versus power. Integration versus separation. Love versus self-defense. But here's the truth. Almost no one talks about. They only met once. Just once. For less than 2 minutes. On March 26, 1964. In the halls of the U.S. Capitol. They were both attending a Senate debate on the Civil Rights Act. King had just finished a press conference. Malcolm walked up, extended his hand, and smiled. A photographer snapped the moment. And just like that, they were gone, never to meet again. No interviews, no debates, no unity, no clash, just silence. Why? Was it the FBI's plan to keep them apart? Was it ideological tension? Or was it simply too dangerous for America to see them stand together? Imagine what they could have built. The radical preacher and the militant philosopher. What could they have changed together? But history didn't give us that version. It gave us two legends, separated by time, tactics, and maybe fear. Fact 5. He won the Nobel Prize. From a hospital bed, we remember the applause, the cameras, the gold medallion, the powerful speech that followed. But few people know where Martin Luther King Jr. was when he found out he had just become the youngest person in history to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He wasn't on a stage. He wasn't in a suit. He wasn't even standing. He was in a hospital bed, exhausted, burned out, worn thin by the weight of leading a movement against a nation built to resist him. The year was 1964. Dr. King was just 35 years old, and despite the headlines, the world tours, the global recognition, he was tired. His body had been pushed to the edge. His mind was heavy. His spirit was being tested daily by death threats, internal pressure, and external hate. And yet, even there, lying down, wrapped in fatigue, he had become something the world couldn't ignore, a symbol of conscience. But here's the question. Can a country celebrate your peace while trying to destroy your presence? King accepted the Nobel Prize, but he didn't see it as a reward. He saw it as a reminder that the real fight had just begun. Fact 4. He led a 13-month bus boycott. December 1st, 1955. A tired black woman named Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. The world would later call it a moment of courage, but what came next was a test of endurance. What most people forget is that behind that moment, behind that single act, stood a 26-year-old preacher, Martin Luther King Jr., and what he led was not a protest. It was a revolution of patience. 13 months. That's how long black residents of Montgomery refused to ride the buses. Rain or shine, old or young. They walked, they carpooled, they sacrificed. Every single day. Not 1 week, not a trending hashtag. 13 months of silent rebellion. But what was the goal? Not to get better seats, but to dismantle the idea that they were less than human. And it worked. On November 13th, 1956, the Supreme Court ruled bus segregation unconstitutional. But ask yourself, would you walk to work, to school, to the hospital? For over a year, they did. And through blistered feet, they moved a nation. That boycott wasn't just about buses. It was about dignity. Fact 3. Almost 1,000 streets are named after him. There was a time when a black man couldn't walk on the same sidewalk as a white man, when even his shadow was seen as a threat. Now, there are nearly 1,000 streets in the United States that carry his name. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, MLK Drive, MLK Way. In Georgia alone, there are over 125 streets that honor him. Schools, libraries, parks, even highways built on land where black homes once stood. now carry his name. But here's the real question. Is that honor, or is that history being managed? Because behind every street sign, there's a neighborhood, and many of them still struggle. Poverty, over-policing, underfunded schools, and sometimes it feels like America stamped his name on the map so it wouldn't have to stamp his ideas on the system. Dr. King once said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." Today, the signs bearing his name speak loudly. But are we really listening? So next time you drive down Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, ask yourself, has the dream turned into a direction, or is it still waiting for a destination? Fact 2. He was a child genius. Before the marches, before the speeches, before the dream, he was just a kid, a curious, restless, brilliant boy named Michael King Jr. And even then, something was different. By age 13, he was skipping grades. By 15, he had already graduated high school. While most teenagers were worried about dances or exams, Martin was already starting college. He read the entire dictionary just to improve his vocabulary. He took violin and piano lessons. He sang in the church choir. He questioned everything, even his own faith, out loud and often. But genius isn't just about grades. It's about depth, and young Martin had it in abundance. Yet, even with his brilliance, he wasn't perfect. He got into fights. He challenged authority. He wrestled with identity, purpose, and pain. Because intelligence doesn't protect you from racism, and talent doesn't make the world treat you with dignity. What it did do was prepare him, not just to lead, but to understand. So when he spoke to millions years later, he wasn't speaking down to them. He was speaking from a place he'd lived, and that's why people listened, not just to his mind, but to his soul. Fact 1. He's buried in a national park. When Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968, the world mourned. Streets filled with tears, cities burned in anguish. A movement lost its voice. But even in death, Dr. King didn't fade into silence. He was laid to rest in his hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, not just in a cemetery, but in something far more symbolic, a national historic park. Today, his tomb sits on a marble platform, surrounded by a reflecting pool, in the heart of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historical Park. And next to him lies Coretta Scott King, his wife, partner, and fellow warrior in the struggle for justice. It's a place of peace, of memory, of purpose. But it also asks a question, one we all must answer. Has America honored the man, or only the monument? We built the museum, we named the streets, we visit the site, but do we carry the message? Because Dr. King didn't die for us to just remember him. He died hoping we would continue him. And that pool, still rippling, reflects more than his legacy. It reflects us. You've just seen the man behind the dream. But what if I told you there was another voice, just as powerful, one the world tried to keep separate from his? Their paths crossed once, just once. But that moment, and what it could have become, might change how you see both of them forever. Click here. The story they never told you is waiting.